The cold, damp air of the dilapidated asylum seemed to whisper promises of oblivion. There, amidst crumbling walls and broken windows, her millionaire grandson pushed his grandmother's wheelchair. Her eyes, once full of memories, now wandered lost in the fog of dementia. He didn't need to get his hands dirty. Time, hunger, and isolation would do the job. Nature will take care of it, he thought, with an icy smile as he walked away, leaving her alone in the gloom. The grandmother, frail and confused, merely clutched an empty purse to her chest, not understanding the abandonment. But from the shadows, an imposing presence emerged. A lion, with its majestic mane, was not a monster but an ancestral force. It approached, not with ferocity but with a strange curiosity. With a precise and surprisingly gentle movement, the lion bit the wheelchair handle, not to attack but to pull her. Backwards, with an instinctive and protective strength, it dragged her away from the imminent danger of the ruins, out of the darkness, towards the warmth and golden light of the sun, where life still pulsed. The sun, a golden balm, kissed the grandmother's wrinkled face, pulling her from the cold gloom that threatened to swallow her. It wasn't an aggressive heat, but a soft caress, a reminder that the world outside still existed, vibrant and full of light. Her eyes, once opaque and lost, blinked, trying to decipher the intensity that enveloped her. Dementia, a relentless fog, did not dissipate, but for an instant, confusion gave way to a kind of silent awe. She didn't understand the lion, the wheelchair being pulled, or the vastness of the blue sky opening above her, but she felt the warmth, and that, in itself, was a revelation after the damp cold of the ruins. The lion, a titan of muscle and golden fur, did not stop. With the wheelchair handle still gently held between its powerful teeth, it continued to retreat, moving with surprising grace for an animal of its size. Each step was deliberate, each movement calculated, as if it were following an invisible map drawn only in its ancestral instinct. The tall, dry grass, which surrounded the abandoned asylum like a forgotten sea, whispered beneath its paws, marking the path away from the shadows of the crumbling walls. Her millionaire grandson, in his bubble of cruelty and indifference, was already far away. In his luxurious car, the air conditioning filtered out the world, and classical music muffled any trace of guilt. He imagined his grandmother wasting away, time doing the dirty work, and a cold smile danced on his lips. Nature, in his distorted view, was a tool for his ends, a silent and unquestioning executor. Little did he know that nature, in its wild wisdom, had chosen a different path, an unlikely protector for the forgotten soul. The grandmother, with the empty purse still clutched to her chest, watched the world pass in a blur. The twisted trees, the distant silhouettes of the mountains, the smell of earth and dry vegetation, everything was a tapestry of disconnected sensations. But the lion was a constant presence, a focal point in her fragmented universe. She felt no fear. Perhaps dementia had stolen her ability to discern danger, or perhaps, in her childlike innocence, she saw in the majestic feline not a predator, but a large, warm shadow, a silent guardian. Her eyes, now more attentive, followed the swaying mane, the rhythm of the animal's breathing, the contained strength in each movement. The lion pulled her across an open field, where the sun beat down mercilessly, but also without the hidden threats of the ruins. The tension, previously concentrated on the imminent danger of collapse, now transformed into a strange expectation. Where would it take her? What was the purpose of this improbable journey? There was no hurry in its movements, only an unwavering determination. It was as if time had bent and the logic of the human world had been suspended in favor of an older, more primal order. With each meter they moved away from the asylum, the landscape subtly changed. Debris and rubble gave way to denser bushes, to small elevations of terrain, to a dry stream that snaked like a scar on the earth. The lion seemed to know exactly where to go, navigating the terrain with the familiarity of one who knows every stone, every shadow. It was not a lost animal, but a guide, a beacon of instinct in a sea of forgetfulness. The grandmother in her wheelchair was a passive passenger, but not completely oblivious. The gentle sway of the chair, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the sound of grass rustling against the wheels. All of this kept her anchored in a present that, though incomprehensible, was infinitely kinder than the future her grandson had planned for her. She let out a small sigh, an almost inaudible sound which could have been from tiredness, relief, or perhaps a fleeting memory of a time when the sun was a friend and life, a promise. The lion, in a moment of pause, stopped, not to rest, but to observe. Its amber eyes swept the horizon, assessing the environment, searching for something only it could see. The grandmother, not understanding the pause, merely looked at the vast expanse of sky. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of insects and the wind whispering through the leaves. It was a silence that spoke of a wild, untamed world, where survival was the only law, and where, paradoxically, an old woman with dementia found an unexpected refuge in the teeth of a predator. The journey had not ended. It was just beginning, and the destination, like nature itself, remained a fascinating and terrifying mystery. The lion's pause was not one of hesitation, but of a silent assessment, an ancestral calculation etched in its instincts. Its amber eyes, which had swept the horizon with the wisdom of 1,000 hunts, then fixed on a distant point, beyond the rolling hills and scrubland. There was purpose in its gaze, a clear direction that only it could discern. With a smooth and decisive movement, it resumed its march. The wheelchair handle still held with surprising delicacy between its powerful teeth. There was no hurry, but an unwavering determination, as if time, for it, was merely a river to be crossed. The journey took them away from the open fields and dry grass that surrounded the asylum. The terrain began to change, becoming rougher, with small elevations and depressions that challenged the stability of the wheelchair. Each jolt was absorbed by the lion's strength, which seemed to anticipate obstacles, adjusting its stride to minimize the discomfort of its fragile passenger. The sun, which had previously kissed the grandmother's face with a gentle caress, now beat down with greater intensity, warming her wrinkled skin and making her blink repeatedly. Dementia, a relentless fog, kept her trapped in her own fragmented world, but the warmth, the movement, and the imposing presence of the lion were undeniable sensations, anchoring points in her confused present. She clutched the empty purse to her chest, an automatic gesture from a distant past, as her eyes followed the golden mane that swayed rhythmically before her. There was no fear, only a childlike curiosity, a passive acceptance of her bizarre fate. The outside world, with its dangers and wonders, was filtered by her mind, transformed into a tapestry of disconnected colors, sounds, and sensations, but the figure of the lion, so real and tangible, was a focal point, a warm and protective shadow in her universe. Meanwhile, miles away, her millionaire grandson reveled in the illusion of his victory. In his air-conditioned office, surrounded by works of art and opulent silence, he reviewed financial reports, the cold smile still on his lips. The image of his grandmother, abandoned to her fate, was an insignificant detail, an account to be closed, a problem solved. He believed he had bent nature to his will, using it as an instrument for his selfish ends. Little did he know that nature, in its wild and unpredictable wisdom, had woven a very different plot, one that defied all his logic and cruelty. The lion continued to pull, entering an area where the vegetation became denser. Thorny bushes and twisted trees formed a natural labyrinth, and the air, previously open and vast, now became heavier, laden with the smell of earth, dry leaves, and the wild scent of unseen animals. The tension, which had previously hung like an invisible threat, now intensified with the feeling of being immersed in an unknown and untamed territory. With each step, the wheelchair creaked, a small, fragile sound in the vast silence of nature. Suddenly, the lion stopped again, this time not to observe the horizon, but to sniff the air. Its head rose, nostrils flared, catching invisible messages carried by the wind. A low, guttural growl escaped its throat, a sound not of aggression, but of alert, of recognition of a presence. The grandmother, oblivious to the imminent danger, merely felt the interruption of movement. Her eyes fixed on the lion's mane, which now seemed more tense, more alert. The sound of branches breaking in the distance, followed by a rustling in the dense vegetation, broke the silence. It was not the sound of a small animal, but of something larger, moving cautiously. The tension became palpable, a weight in the air. The lion, with a swift and fluid movement, positioned itself slightly in front of the wheelchair, shielding the grandmother with its massive body. Its eyes, previously curious and gentle, now gleamed with a contained ferocity, focused in the direction of the sound. The journey, which seemed like an escape to safety, had transformed into a crossing through a world where life and death danced in an eternal ballet, and where the unlikely protector was about to face a new challenge. The grandmother, in her bubble of confusion, was the center of a battle she would never understand, but one that would decide her fate. The grandmother, in her bubble of confusion, was the center of a battle she would never understand, but one that would decide her fate. The lion's growl, low and vibrant, reverberated through the dense vegetation, a primal warning that preceded the storm. Dry branches snapped again, closer now, and the rustling of leaves intensified, revealing not one, but several lean, spotted silhouettes emerging from the shadows. They were wild dogs, with their large, rounded ears, piercing eyes, and dark muzzles moving with ghostly agility. A hungry and opportunistic pack that had sniffed out the unusual presence and the potential for easy prey. The lion, a monument of strength and instinct, did not hesitate. With a roar that made the earth tremble and the air vibrate, it positioned itself even more protectively in front of the wheelchair. It was not a hunting roar, but one of defense, an unmistakable warning that this territory and the fragile creature behind it were under its guard. The golden mane bristled, the muscles beneath the golden fur contracted, and its amber eyes, previously gentle, now burned with an ancestral fury. It was the king, and these intruders were challenging its sovereignty, its strange and newly discovered responsibility. The grandmother, with the empty purse still clutched to her chest, felt the vibration of the roar through the wheelchair, her eyes, which had previously wandered aimlessly, fixed on the lion. Dementia, a thick fog, prevented her from deciphering the imminent danger, from understanding the contained ferocity in the animal before her and the approaching threat, but something in her body reacted. A shiver ran down her spine, not from conscious fear, but from an instinctive response to a powerful and primal energy. She let out a small sound, an almost inaudible murmur, as if trying to communicate with the great golden shadow that protected her. The wild dogs, 5 in number, stopped at a respectful distance but did not retreat. Their hungry eyes assessed the lion, the wheelchair, the old woman. They were relentless hunters, accustomed to taking down prey much larger than themselves, using the strategy of encirclement and attrition. The smell of meat, of vulnerability, was an irresistible invitation. They began to move in a semicircle, testing the lion's limits, looking for a breach, a weak point. Their growls were sharper, a chorus of threats that contrasted with the depth of the lion's roar. The lion turned its head slightly, following the pack's movement, but keeping its massive body between the grandmother and the predators. It knew it could not afford a prolonged chase. Its priority was the safety of its fragile passenger. With a swift and surprising movement, it took a step forward, a feigned attack that made the wild dogs recoil sharply, their growls turning into nervous barks. The display of strength was clear. It was not to be trifled with. Meanwhile, miles away, in his luxurious and isolated office, her millionaire grandson toasted with expensive whiskey. The stock market news was excellent, and his grandmother's absence from his life was a palpable relief. He felt in control, a master of the universe, manipulating people and circumstances with the same ease with which he moved pieces on a chessboard. The image of his grandmother, wasting away in an abandoned asylum, was a comforting thought, proof of his cunning and his ability to shed any burden. He could not conceive of the irony, the twist that nature, in its wild unpredictability, had orchestrated. His grandmother, whom he considered dead weight, was being protected by a majestic predator, while he, the human predator, lived in a bubble of ignorance and self-deception. Back in the dense vegetation, the tension was almost unbearable. The wild dogs, though intimidated, did not give up easily. They continued to circle, their eyes fixed on the wheelchair, on the opportunity it represented. The lion, realizing that a mere display of force would not be enough, let out another powerful roar, this time more prolonged, more menacing, and made a short but decisive leap towards one of the dogs, which yelped and recoiled disorderly, tripping over the others. That was the turning point. The pack, accustomed to hunting weaker or isolated prey, recognized the danger. The lion was not just defending. It was ready to fight, and fighting a lion in its territory, especially one so determined, was not a gamble worth taking. With a final bark of frustration, the wild dogs turned and disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, their lean silhouettes dissolving into the density of the vegetation. The lion waited, its eyes still fixed in the direction the dogs had gone, nostrils flared, sniffing the air for any trace of their return. The grandmother, oblivious to the battle that had just been fought on her behalf, merely felt the silence return, the vibration of the roar cease. She blinked, her eyes fixed on the lion's mane, which now seemed to relax slightly. The warmth of the sun continued to kiss her face, and the smell of earth and dry leaves lingered in the air. With the immediate threat gone, the lion let out a deep sigh, almost a huff, and resumed its movement. The wheelchair handle, still held with the same surprising delicacy between its teeth, was pulled forward. The journey continued, but now with a new layer of meaning. The lion was not just a guide, it was a protector, an unlikely guardian in a wild and unforgiving world. Where would it take her? What would be the next challenge? The mystery remained, as vast and untamed as the nature that surrounded them. But the grandmother, in her demented innocence, was safe, for now, in the care of her majestic savior. The silence that followed the departure of the wild dogs was not a silence of peace, but of suspension. The air still vibrated with the memory of the lion's roar, and the acrid smell of adrenaline hung over the dense vegetation. The lion, majestic in its vigilance, remained motionless for a few more moments, sniffing the wind, its amber eyes sweeping the direction from which the threat had come. Only when the certainty that the danger had truly dissipated settled in, did it let out a soft huff, an almost imperceptible sound of relief and renewed readiness. The wheelchair handle, still held with the same surprising delicacy between its teeth, was pulled again. The journey resumed, but now with a different rhythm. There was no longer the urgency of an escape, but the determination of a purpose. The lion seemed to know exactly where it was going, its steps firm and calculated, navigating through the bushes and twisted trees with an innate wisdom. The grandmother, in her bubble of confusion, felt the movement restart. the gentle sway of the chair, the warmth of the sun still kissing her face, and the constant, warm presence of the lion before her were the only points of reference in her fragmented world. She did not understand the battle that had just been fought, nor the contained ferocity that had saved her life. For her, the lion was just a golden shadow pulling her to an unknown place, a familiar figure amidst the strangeness. Her eyes, previously fixed on the mane, now drifted to the passing leaves, to the sunbeams filtering through the foliage, creating a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. Perhaps in some hidden corner of her mind, the wild nature was awakening memories of a simpler time, of a distant childhood when the world was vast and full of wonders. The vegetation began to change. Dense bushes gave way to taller trees, with canopies that intertwined, forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into golden shafts. The ground, previously covered by dry leaves and branches, became rockier, with loose stones and small elevations. The wheelchair creaked and rattled with greater intensity, each jolt a reminder of the vehicle's fragility and the lion's tenacity. It slowed down in more difficult sections, adjusting the force of its bite on the handle to prevent the chair from tipping over. It was a delicate dance between brute force and precision, a testament to the animal's intelligence and protective instinct. The sun began to decline on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Shadows lengthened, transforming the forest into a labyrinth of distorted and mysterious shapes. The air, previously heavy, began to cool, bringing with it the damp smell of earth and the sweet, heavy aroma of night-blooming flowers. The sounds of the forest also changed. The chirping of diurnal birds gave way to the chirps and hums of insects, and the distant call of nocturnal animals beginning to awaken. The tension, which had subsided after the confrontation with the dogs, now returned, subtle and insidious, with the promise of night. Back in the forest, the lion stopped again. This time, not to sniff for danger, but to assess the environment. Its eyes scanned a small clearing, protected by a rock formation on one side and a dense thicket of bushes on the other. A large tree with low branches offered natural shelter. It was a strategic location, offering some protection from the wind and the curious eyes of the night. With a final pull, it brought the wheelchair to the center of the clearing, positioning it so that the grandmother was with her back to the rock, a natural shield. The grandmother felt the interruption of movement and looked at the lion. The golden twilight bathed its mane, making it look like a mythical creature. She felt no hunger, no thirst, nor the cold that was beginning to set in. Her mind, a labyrinth of lost memories, was in a state of passive acceptance. She merely watched the lion, which now released the wheelchair handle and moved to inspect the surroundings of the clearing, its steps silent and powerful. Night fell quickly, bringing with it an orchestra of unknown sounds. The distant howl of a jackal, the rustling of leaves under the weight of invisible creatures, the incessant hum of insects. The darkness was almost total, broken only by the pale light of the crescent moon beginning to emerge between the treetops. The lion returned to the clearing, its eyes shining in the dark. It lay down heavily beside the wheelchair, its massive body forming a protective barrier. The warmth of its body radiated, an unexpected comfort in the cold night. The grandmother, in her chair, felt the lion's presence. There was no fear, only a sense of security, of a familiar warmth. She reached out hesitantly, and her fingers touched the soft, warm fur of the mane. The lion did not move, allowing the touch. It was a gesture of mutual trust, a silent connection forged in adversity. The journey had transformed into a night vigil, and the lion, the king of the jungle, had become a guardian, an unlikely protector of a lost soul. The mystery of their fate deepened with the darkness, but for now, under the moonlight and the protection of her golden savior, the grandmother was safe, falling asleep to the sound of the lion's deep, constant breathing. The night in the forest was a tapestry of sounds and shadows, but in the small clearing, under the lion's protection, a peculiar silence had settled. The grandmother slept, a deep and dreamless sleep. Her features relaxed for the first time in a long while. The warmth of the lion's massive body radiated, an anchor of security amidst the wild vastness. Her fingers still brushed against the soft mane, an innocent touch that the king of the jungle allowed, a silent pact forged in the darkness. But the lion did not sleep. Its amber eyes, golden slits in the gloom, swept the surrounding darkness. Every rustle of a leaf, every snap of a twig was processed by its keen senses. The smell of damp earth, the aroma of night-blooming flowers, and more importantly, the invisible trails of other lives moving in the night. It was the sentinel, the guardian of a treasure it did not comprehend, but which its instinct compelled it to protect. The tension, though not visible, was palpable in the cold night air. The forest never truly sleeps. Far off, a solitary howl echoed, a melancholic and hungry sound that dissipated among the trees. The lion did not move, but its muscles contracted slightly beneath its fur. It recognized the sound, a jackal, perhaps more than one, hunting in smaller packs. They were not a direct threat to a lion, but their presence indicated the proximity of other creatures, perhaps bolder, more dangerous. A closer rustle coming from the thicket of bushes that protected the clearing made the lion raise its head, its eyes fixed on the spot from which the sound came. A pair of gleaming eyes, red in the dark, watched it back. A hyena. Not a pack, but a single curious and opportunistic one, drawn by the smell of something unusual, of a strange presence in its territory. The hyena hesitated, assessing the lion, the wheelchair, the sleeping figure. Its survival instinct screamed danger, but curiosity was strong. The lion let out a low, deep growl that vibrated in the air and made the hyena take a step back. It was not an attack roar, but an unmistakable warning. This territory, this prey, is under my protection. The hyena, with a frustrated yelp, turned and disappeared into the darkness, its hurried steps revealing its fear. The lion waited, head held high, until the last sound of the hyena faded into the distance. Only then did it lower its head, but its eyes remained vigilant. The grandmother, in her sleep, felt a slight vibration, a comforting warmth that enveloped her. Somewhere deep in her mind, an image emerged, a soft blanket, a crackling fire, the feeling of being safe. She smiled faintly, a smile that did not reach her eyes, but which brought a momentary peace to her aged face. Dementia was a fog, but the feeling of protection was real, tangible, and broke through the barrier of her fragmented mind. Hours dragged on. The crescent moon rose and set, painting the forest with silvery and blue hues. The air grew colder, and dew began to form on the leaves. Finally, a pale glow appeared on the eastern horizon. The sky began to lighten, first with a soft gray, then with shades of pink and gold, announcing the new day. The sounds of the night gave way to the first birdsong, a gentle chorus celebrating the dawn. The lion, sensing the change in light and temperature, slowly rose. It stretched its massive body, its muscles lengthening after the long vigil. Its eyes, previously fixed on the darkness, now turned to the east, to the sun beginning to rise. There was a renewed purpose in its gaze, a determination that transcended mere instinct. It was not just protecting, it was guiding. The grandmother, awakened by the absence of the lion's warmth and the light invading the clearing, opened her eyes. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, but the sight of the lion, majestic against the sunrise, brought a strange familiarity. She did not remember where she was, or how she had gotten there, but the golden presence before her was a fixed point in her constantly changing world. The lion approached the wheelchair, its movements deliberate. With the same surprising delicacy, it took the chair handle between its teeth. There was no hurry, only a calm resolve. It gently pulled her out of the clearing onto the trail that revealed itself with the morning light. The journey continued, and the destination, though still unknown, seemed to be towards the light, away from the shadows of the forest and the darkness of memory. Meanwhile, in his world of skyscrapers and millionaire transactions, her millionaire grandson woke up in his luxurious penthouse. He checked the stock market on his tablet, the green numbers confirming his success. The memory of his grandmother was a fleeting thought, a footnote in his busy mind. He had already given orders to begin the demolition of the old asylum so the land could be repurposed. In his arrogance, he believed he had erased all traces of his shame, unaware that with each step of the lion, his grandmother was being led to a destiny far grander and more unexpected than any of his ventures could ever conceive. The forest, in its ancestral wisdom, was rewriting the script, and the lion was its golden messenger. The sun, now a golden and imposing sphere, poured its light over the forest, transforming the shadows of the night into a vibrant mosaic of green and gold. Dew sparkled on the leaves, and the air, previously cold and damp, began to warm, promising a long and perhaps exhausting day. The lion, with the wheelchair handle firmly held between its teeth, advanced with unwavering determination. Its steps were rhythmic, powerful, clearing a path through the undergrowth that the morning light revealed in all its density. The grandmother, sitting in her chair, felt the gentle, almost hypnotic sway of the movement. The sunlight on her face was a welcome sensation, a warmth that penetrated her clothes and warmed her bones. Her eyes, previously fixed on the lion, now wandered through the forest, observing the colors and shapes unfolding before her. She did not comprehend the journey, nor the purpose of her golden guardian, but there was a strange peace in her passivity. The outside world, with its complexity and demands, had been reduced to this present moment, the sun, the movement, the constant presence of the lion. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became more intense. The air grew heavy, laden with the smell of damp earth and the sweet, pungent fragrance of wildflowers. The lion, despite its strength and endurance, began to feel the effects of continuous exertion and rising temperature. Its breathing was deeper, and the muscles in its legs worked tirelessly. It knew it needed to find water, not only for itself, but for the fragile cargo it stubbornly dragged. Its instincts, sharpened by necessity, guided it towards a distant sound, a soft murmur that promised relief. The forest during the day presented its own challenges. Thick, twisted roots rose from the ground, threatening to snag the chair's wheels. Low branches and hanging vines required the lion to maneuver carefully, preventing the grandmother from being hit. At one point, a group of vervet monkeys, curious and noisy, watched them from the treetops, their sharp chirps echoing through the forest. The lion ignored them, maintaining its focus, its journey. The grandmother, for a brief moment, smiled at the sight of the monkeys, a fleeting memory of a distant zoo, of children's laughter and popcorn. But the image dissolved as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the fog. The distant sound of water grew clearer, an irresistible invitation. The lion quickened its pace, its muscles tense with anticipation. The vegetation began to thin, and the sunlight became more intense, indicating they were approaching a more open area. Finally, the forest opened onto a wide, serene riverbank, its crystal-clear waters reflecting the blue sky. The sight was of stunning beauty, an oasis of life amidst the density of the forest. The lion pulled the wheelchair to the river's edge, stopping under the shade of a large tree. It released the handle and, with a deep sigh, lowered its head to drink from the cool, inviting water. The grandmother, feeling the interruption of movement and the change in environment, looked at the river. The sparkle of the water, the gentle sound of the current, awakened in her a thirst she didn't know she had. Her lips were dry, her throat scratchy. She reached out an instinctive gesture towards the water. The lion, having quenched its thirst, raised its head. Its eyes met the grandmother's, and it seemed to understand her need. It approached the wheelchair and, with surprising delicacy, pushed the grandmother a little further forward so her feet could touch the damp sand of the bank. Then, with its muzzle, it gently nudged her hand, as if encouraging her to reach for the water. The grandmother, with an effort, leaned forward, and her fingers touched the cold surface of the river. She brought her wet hand to her lips, feeling the immediate relief. It was a small miracle, a primal connection to life, orchestrated by her golden guardian. The journey had led them to the source of life, but what the river held beyond its banks and what the lion planned next remained a mystery, as deep as the waters that now quenched the grandmother's thirst. The fresh river water, a balm for her dry throat, brought the grandmother a sense of primal relief. There was no memory of thirst, only the immediate satisfaction of a fundamental desire. Her fingers, still damp, rested on the soft sand of the bank, and for an instant the fog of dementia seemed to recede, allowing a simple, fleeting peace to envelop her. She did not know where she was or why, but the coolness of the water and the welcoming shade of the tree were enough. The lion, having quenched its own thirst, did not fully relax. Its golden eyes, previously fixed on the grandmother, now swept the river's surface and the opposite banks. The forest, even in its apparent daytime tranquility, was a place of hidden dangers, and the river, a vital artery, attracted all sorts of creatures. A low, almost imperceptible murmur escaped its throat, a constant reminder of its vigilance. It was not just protecting, it was anticipating. The sun continued to rise, and the morning heat intensified, making the air shimmer over the water. Small fish leaped, creating ripples on the surface, and colorful birds swooped down to drink. It was a scene of exuberant life, but nature, in its beauty, also harbored a silent brutality. It was then that the lion noticed, not a sound, but an absence. The birds had fallen silent. The fish stopped leaping. A tense quiet settled over the river, its eyes fixed on a spot on the opposite bank where the water was darker, deeper. A shadow moved, slow, almost imperceptible. It was not a floating log nor a stone. It was a reptilian form, ancient and lethal, gliding beneath the surface. A crocodile, large with rough skin and cold, calculating eyes, it emerged slowly, drawn by the unusual presence on the bank. Its eyes, like two yellow beads, fixed on the grandmother, on the wheelchair, on the easy, immobile prey. The lion let out a deeper growl this time, a sound that reverberated through the earth and made the grandmother tremble slightly. She did not comprehend the danger, but she felt the change in the atmosphere, the tension emanating from her guardian. Her eyes widened slightly, seeking the lion's face, as if looking for an explanation her mind could not process. The crocodile, unperturbed, continued to move, its powerful tail propelling it through the water. It was in no hurry, confident in its aquatic superiority. The lion knew that a direct fight in the water would be madness. Its kingdom was the land, not the treacherous depths of the river. It needed to act, and fast. With a swift and decisive movement, the lion bit the wheelchair handle again. This time, there was no delicacy, but a palpable urgency. It pulled the grandmother forcefully back, away from the water's edge, to the relative safety of the denser vegetation. The chair's wheels spun on the damp sand, raising small clouds of dust. The grandmother let out a small gasp of surprise, her body swaying with the abrupt movement. The crocodile, realizing its prey was being taken away, accelerated. A violent splash marked the spot where it had been, and the water churned with the fury of its movement. It emerged a little more, showing its powerful jaws, full of razor-sharp teeth. The air grew heavy with the threat. The lion continued to pull, its muscles tense, each step a race against time. It did not look back, trusting its instincts to guide it away from the imminent danger. The grandmother, clinging to the arms of the chair, felt the tremor of her body, the accelerated rhythm of the escape. For a brief moment, an image of an ancient nightmare, of teeth and darkness, flashed through her mind. But it was quickly replaced by the sensation of being dragged, of being in motion. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, her millionaire grandson was in his private helicopter, flying over what remained of the old asylum. Demolition machines had done their work, reducing the structure to a pile of rubble and dust. He watched the scene with cold satisfaction, his phone to his ear, dictating orders to the architects about the new luxury complex that would rise there. "No traces of the past," he instructed, his voice laden with authority. "I want it to be a symbol of the future, of modernity." He had no idea that at the exact moment he was erasing the past, his grandmother was being snatched from the jaws of an ancestral predator, carried to a future he could never conceive. The lion finally stopped, panting, when the vegetation became dense enough to hide the wheelchair from the river's view. It released the handle, its eyes still fixed on the direction of the water, waiting, listening. The frustrated crocodile had submerged again, but the threat still hung in the air. The lion knew they could not stay there. The river, which had previously seemed a refuge, was now a danger. It turned, its eyes meeting the grandmother's. There was a silent determination in its gaze, a promise of protection. The journey to the sun had not ended. It had merely found a new detour, a new obstacle to overcome. It needed to find a safer path, a place where the sunlight could bathe them without the shadow of predators. The lion, the golden guardian, was ready to continue, guiding her away from the treacherous banks into the heart of the forest in search of a new dawn. The lion did not hesitate. The crocodile's roar, a guttural sound of frustration and threat, still echoed from the riverbank, but the golden guardian was already in motion. It could not afford to look back, to calculate the danger it left behind. Its instincts, sharp as its claws, screamed for action, for distance, for safety. With the wheelchair handle firmly held between its teeth, it pulled the grandmother away from the damp sand and into the density of the forest. Each step was an affirmation of purpose. The wheelchair's wheels, previously gliding on the sand, now struggled against the tangle of roots and dry leaves. The lion maneuvered with surprising agility for its size, swerving around fallen logs and thorny bushes. The grandmother, swaying in the chair, felt the impact of each obstacle, the constant tremor of her body. The fog in her mind was thick, but the sensation of being dragged, of being in an incessant flight, was undeniable. She gripped the chair's arms tightly, her knuckles white, a primal reflex of self-preservation. The lion did not seek a path, it forged one. Its broad shoulders pushed aside the vegetation, creating an improvised trail. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filled the air, mixed with the wild aroma of the lion itself. It delved deeper into the forest, moving away from the treacherous river, seeking refuge where the shadows were longer, and the sunlight, though filtered, offered a promise of warmth and safety. The sun, which had previously bathed the riverbank, now became a mosaic of light and shadow, dancing through the treetops. Golden rays pierced the dense foliage, illuminating patches of moss and wildflowers, as if the forest were revealing its own secrets. The lion seemed to follow these patches of light, a silent beacon amidst the verdant darkness. It ascended a small incline, its hind leg muscles working with effort, but without faltering. The grandmother felt the change in angle, the lion's exertion, and for a brief moment an image of a horse pulling a cart on a dusty road surfaced in her mind. An old and contextless memory, but one that brought with it a sense of familiarity and weariness. Back in the forest, the lion continued its journey. It paused for a moment, its ears moving, catching the distant sounds of the forest. The chirping of birds, the buzzing of insects, the rustling of leaves. It was scanning the environment, assessing dangers and opportunities. The grandmother, feeling the pause, opened her eyes. The world around her was a green and brown blur, but the warmth of the sun, even if fragmented, was a comfort. She looked at the lion, her cloudy eyes meeting the animal's golden ones. There was no fear, only a silent acceptance, an instinctive trust in that improbable guardian. The lion let out a low murmur, almost a purr, and resumed movement. It had found a path, a clearing that promised temporary rest. The vegetation began to thin again, and the sunlight became more present, more welcoming. They emerged into a small clearing, a circular space where the trees receded, allowing the sun to bathe the ground covered in soft grass. In the center, there was a large, moss-covered rock that offered a place to shelter. The lion pulled the wheelchair to the base of the rock, under the partial shade it offered, and released the handle. It lay down beside the chair, its eyes still vigilant, but its body relaxed. The grandmother, sensing the quiet, closed her eyes. The warmth of the sun on her face, the smell of the earth, and the silent presence of the lion beside her were all she needed. The journey had been exhausting, but the promise of the sun, of a new dawn, seemed closer than ever. The lion, her golden guardian, had once again led her away from danger to a place of refuge, awaiting the next step in their extraordinary escape. The stillness of the clearing was a balm, a stark contrast to the recent terror of the waters. The sun, now higher in the sky, bathed the circular space with a generous golden light, filtered by the treetops, creating a dancing mosaic on the soft, grassy ground. The grandmother, leaning against the mossy rock, felt the warmth on her face, a gentle caress that seemed to dissipate, for an instant, the persistent fog in her mind. Her eyes closed, she breathed deeply, the pure forest air filling her lungs with a freshness she hadn't felt in a long time. The smell of damp earth, decaying leaves and wildflowers was a wild perfume, a reminder that they were in a world where life pulsed with an untamed force. Beside her, the lion rested, but its rest was a vigil. Its golden eyes, though half-closed, swept the perimeter of the clearing, attentive to every moving shadow, every sound that broke the forest's silence. Its ears moved, catching the distant chirping of birds, the monotonous hum of insects, and the occasional rustle of leaves under the wind. It was the embodiment of calm and threat, a golden guardian that could not afford to lower its guard. The grandmother, in her stillness, felt the lion's massive and comforting presence. There was no fear, only a quiet acceptance, as if the animal were a natural extension of her new reality. In her mind, fragmented images of a sunny garden, a large, soft cat, and a gentle voice singing lullabies mingled and dissolved, leaving behind only the feeling of security. Peace, however, was ephemeral. The sun continued its journey, and with it, shadows lengthened, transforming the clearing into a stage of light and darkness. The lion, with an almost imperceptible movement, raised its head. Its nostrils flared, catching a new scent in the air, an aroma that did not belong to the usual flora and fauna of that place. It was a metallic, acrid smell, mixed with the odor of smoke and something else, something the lion recognized as a threat. Its muscles tensed, and a low, almost inaudible growl escaped its throat. The grandmother, feeling the change in atmosphere, opened her eyes. She saw the rigidity in the lion's body, the intensity in its eyes, and the quietness on her face dissolved, replaced by an expression of confusion and a pang of apprehension. Far away, hundreds of miles distant, her millionaire grandson was in a board meeting, his cold, authoritarian voice echoing in the high-tech conference room. He presented plans for the new luxury complex, projecting 3D images of what the future would be. "This project," he declared, gesturing to the screen, "is not just a building, it's a statement, a statement of modernity, of efficiency, of a future without the burdens of the past. He spoke with unwavering conviction, oblivious to the irony of his words. One of his assistants, a young man with a tablet in hand, discreetly approached and whispered something in his ear. "Sir, the demolition report. There's been a slight delay. It seems they found some unexpected traces underground. Nothing significant, but it requires a schedule deviation." The millionaire grandson frowned, his expression hardening. "Unexpected? I demand that the site be cleared of anything not in the plans. Fix it. I want no surprises. The past must be completely obliterated." He dismissed the assistant with a wave of his hand, his mind already turning to the next topic of the meeting. The pang of discomfort he had felt earlier now turning into irritation. Back in the clearing, the lion rose, its movements fluid and powerful. The smell was stronger now, and it could hear, in the distance, the muffled sound of something heavy moving, followed by a dry snap, like branches breaking. It was not the sound of a forest animal. It was something heavier, more intrusive. It turned to the grandmother, its eyes meeting hers. There was a silent urgency in its gaze, a communication that transcended words. It needed to move her again. The clearing, which had previously offered refuge, now became a point of vulnerability. With a swift movement, the lion bit the wheelchair handle. This time, the grandmother was not startled. She seemed to understand, in her own fragmented world, that it was time to move on. Her fingers tightened on the chair's arms, an instinctive response to the imminent movement. The lion pulled, and the wheelchair's wheels spun on the grass, kicking up small particles of dew. It no longer headed for the heart of the forest, but rather for a less dense trail that opened onto a higher area, where the sunlight seemed more abundant and the trees, though present, did not form such an impenetrable barrier. It climbed the incline with determination, its muscles working in unison. The grandmother felt the sway of the chair, the lion's effort, and the sensation of being carried upwards towards the light was almost liberating. The strange smell and distant sounds seemed to dissipate as they ascended, replaced by lighter air and a broader view of the horizon. The lion, her golden guardian, was once again clearing a path, not just away from danger, but towards a new vantage point, a place where the sun could bathe them without the shadows of threats. The journey to the sun was not a static destination, but a continuous movement, an incessant search for a dawn that was yet to come. The lion pulled, its muscles rippling under its golden hide, a silent, powerful engine. The wheelchair creaked softly over the earth and exposed roots, but the grandmother barely noticed the discomfort. Her eyes, now more open, caught the blurs of green and light passing by, a hypnotic dance of the moving forest. The air thinned subtly, and the smell of pine and dry earth replaced the damp aroma of the valley. The incline was steep, but the lion did not waver, its determination etched in every firm step. It climbed with a silent urgency, as if it knew that every meter took them further from an invisible but imminent danger. With each meter they ascended, the sunlight became more constant, less fragmented by the treetops. It was as if they were climbing towards a beacon, a point of clarity amidst the verdant confusion. The grandmother felt the warmth on her face, no longer as an intermittent caress, but as a constant embrace, a reminder that danger was being left behind, or at least below them. A sense of lightness, almost of floating, enveloped her, dissipating for an instant the persistent fog in her mind. The lion, however, did not relax. Its ears swiveled like radar, catching every sound, every whisper of the wind. The metallic, acrid smell, though fainter up here, still lingered in the air, a persistent ghost of a threat it could not ignore. It knew that the elevation offered an advantage, a panoramic view, but it could also be a trap, if not approached with caution. Its golden eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign, any movement that might indicate the source of the disturbance. The grandmother, in her stillness, seemed to absorb the lion's tension. A pang of something resembling a memory, a distant alarm, a muffled cry, passed through her mind, but dissolved as quickly as it arose. She merely tightened her fingers on the chair's arms, trusting her guardian's primal instinct. They emerged onto a plateau, a high point where the forest opened to a breathtaking view. Below, the treetops stretched like an infinite green carpet, and in the distance a thin line of smoke spiraled into the sky. It was a different smoke from what the lion had smelled before, denser, more industrial. The sun bathed the plateau in glorious light, turning the grass to gold and the leaves to emeralds. There was a sense of immensity, of freedom, that contrasted sharply with the damp darkness of the valley. The lion stopped, releasing the wheelchair handle. It positioned itself at the edge of the plateau, its eyes fixed on the distant smoke. A low, guttural growl escaped its throat, a sound of warning, of recognition. Meanwhile, at the top of his skyscraper, her millionaire grandson was in a rage. The meeting had been interrupted by a series of alarming reports. "Unexpected traces," the contractor repeated over the phone, his voice tense. "It's not just rubble, sir. We found an underground section that wasn't on the maps. It seems to be an old bunker, or perhaps a storage basement. And, well, there are some personal items, old photographs, some toys, and a diary." The millionaire grandson felt his blood run cold. A diary, personal items, his grandmother. The pang of discomfort was now a sharp pain, an irritation bordering on panic. "Burn everything!" he roared, his voice echoing in the office. "I don't want anything from the past to remain. Nothing that could link me to this phase of my life. The demolition must be complete, irrevocable." He slammed the phone down, the sound of plastic cracking filling the tense silence. The pang of discomfort that had turned to pain was now a chilling terror. The idea that something of his grandmother could have survived, that it could be discovered, was a threat to his carefully constructed image, to his new identity. He wanted no traces, no reminders. He wanted total obliteration. Back on the plateau, the lion watched the smoke. Now, a distant, heavy, intermittent hum could be heard, like that of working machinery. The smoke, previously thin, thickened, forming a dark column that rose against the blue sky. It was the sound of destruction, the smell of obliteration. The grandmother, sensing the change in the lion's intensity, opened her eyes. She followed the animal's gaze, her cloudy eyes fixing on the distant smoke. For a brief moment, a clear and painful image surfaced in her mind. The asylum, not in ruins, but in flames, the smell of smoke and despair. A tear rolled down her wrinkled face, a tear of recognition, of loss. She did not know what it was, but the feeling of something precious being destroyed, of a home being erased, was undeniable. The lion, noticing the change in her, let out a soft murmur, almost a lament. It turned to her, its golden eyes meeting hers, a deep and inexplicable connection. It knew that danger was not just approaching, it was consuming the past. It could not stay there. The plateau, while offering a view, also made them visible. With a determined movement, the lion bit the wheelchair handle again. This time, it did not ascend, but began to descend a different, gentler path that snaked down the opposite slope of the plateau. It was a gradual descent towards a more open valley, where the forest seemed less dense and the sun, though still present, was not as intense. The grandmother felt the movement, the descent, and the image of the asylum in flames dissolved, replaced by the sensation of being carried away to a safe place. The lion pulled her with renewed urgency, its muscles working to control the descent. It knew that the obliteration of the past was underway, but it was determined to protect what remained of the present, and perhaps to guide its grandmother to a future where the sun could shine without the shadows of destruction. The journey continued, no longer upwards, but forwards, in search of a refuge that the smoke and the noise of the machines could not reach. The sun, always the sun, was their destination, their promise. The descent was a ballet of gravity and instinct. The lion pulled the wheelchair with controlled strength, its muscles rippling under its golden hide. The trail, gentler than the steep ascent, wound down the opposite slope of the plateau, offering a less rugged path but no less challenging. The wheelchair's wheels creaked softly, a melody of movement that mingled with the rustling of leaves and the distant birdsong. The grandmother felt the rhythmic sway, a cadence that calmed the storm in her mind. The image of the asylum in flames, a ghost of smoke and despair, receded, replaced by the sensation of being cradled, carried away from something terrible. The sun, once a glorious bath on the plateau, now filtered through the treetops more diffusely, creating a mosaic of light and shadow that danced on the forest floor. It was not the intense, unimpeded light of the summit, but a softer, more intimate glow that seemed to envelop the grandmother in a protective embrace. The air was cooler here, laden with the smell of damp earth and moss, a welcome contrast to the acrid, metallic aroma that hung in the heights. She closed her eyes for an instant, and behind her eyelids glimpsed a field of daisies, a picnic by a river, fragmented memories of a life that seemed to belong to someone else, but which, for a brief moment, filled her with a fleeting peace. The lion, however, did not share that peace. Its ears continued to swivel, its senses sharpened to any anomaly. The heavy hum of machines, though muffled by the descent and the density of the forest, was still a constant presence, a grave pulse that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. And the smell. The smell of smoke and burnt metal was undeniable, stronger than before, as if the destruction was spreading, consuming the surrounding forest. It could feel the vibrations through the earth, a subtle tremor that spoke of an implacable force. It knew that the descent led them to a more open valley, a place that offered less cover, but which could also be a faster escape route if necessary. The strategy was fluid, adapting to each new threat, each change in terrain. Meanwhile, at the top of his empire of glass and steel, her millionaire grandson was on the verge of collapse. His face was red, veins throbbing in his forehead. The phone in his hand was an instrument of torture, each new piece of information a blow to his facade of control. "Sir, it's worse than we thought!" The contractor's voice screamed from the other end of the line, barely audible over the background noise. "The bunker. It's not just a basement. It's a network of tunnels that extends beyond the property and the documents. They're extensive. Financial records, letters, even a diary, all with her name on them. It seems she was, well, much more than we thought." The word diary hit the millionaire grandson like a lightning bolt. A diary, not just records, but thoughts, feelings, the very essence of his grandmother, written in her own words. This was not just a trace, it was a voice, a witness, and the network of tunnels. That meant the time capsule could be anywhere, perhaps even outside the boundaries of the property he was demolishing. "I want every square inch of that land searched," he roared, his voice hoarse with despair. "I want every tunnel sealed, every document incinerated. Find that. The capsule. Leave nothing behind. Nothing." He slammed the phone onto the table, the sound of plastic cracking filling the tense silence. The pang of discomfort that had turned to pain was now a chilling terror. The idea that the past could resurface, that his connection to that life could be exposed, was unbearable. Back in the valley, the descent came to an end. The lion stopped in a wider clearing, where the trees receded, revealing a field of tall, wild grass that stretched to a winding stream. The sun here was fuller, bathing the scene with a golden glow that seemed to wash away the shadows. It was a place of serene beauty, an apparent refuge, but the lion did not relax. The sound of the machines, previously muffled, was now more distinct. A rhythmic hammering that seemed to draw closer, and the smell of smoke and burnt metal was undeniable, stronger than before, as if the destruction was spreading, consuming the surrounding forest. The grandmother opened her eyes, drawn by the lion's intensity. She looked at the field, at the stream, and then her eyes, previously cloudy, fixed on a distant point. Above the tree line, not far off, a column of dark, dense smoke rose rapidly, no longer a thin line, but a growing cloud that stained the blue sky. And with it, the sound of something heavy falling, a crash that made the earth tremble. It was not just demolition, it was a conflagration, the asylum. Her mind, for a fleeting instant, connected the dots. It was not a fragmented memory. It was a present vision, the destruction of her last home. A warm tear rolled down her face, not from confusion, but from a clear, searing pain. The lion let out a low, deep growl, its golden eyes fixed on the smoke. It could feel the urgency, the imminent threat. The valley, though beautiful, was no longer safe. The destruction was expanding, swallowing everything in its path. It turned to the grandmother, its eyes meeting hers. There was a mutual understanding, a silent communication that time was running out. It could not stay there, waiting for the smoke and noise to reach them. The sun was a destination, yes, but also a direction, a continuous path away from the spreading darkness. With a swift and decisive movement, the lion bit the wheelchair handle again. This time, it did not follow the stream, nor did it venture deeper into the open field. Instead, it turned towards a denser line of trees at the edge of the valley, a stretch of forest that seemed untouched, almost wild. It was a more difficult path, but it offered cover, a green veil against the eyes of destruction. It pulled, and the wheelchair began to move, no longer towards an open sun, but into the safety of the shadows, to a place where the past, perhaps, could find refuge, and the future a new hope, away from the fury of obliteration. The journey deepened, not into the light, but into the essence of the forest, where the sun could still penetrate, but danger could not. The forest swallowed them. It was no longer the gentle descent or the open clearing, but a green and dark labyrinth where sunlight struggled to penetrate. The lion did not hesitate. Its golden eyes, previously fixed on the smoke, now scanned the terrain ahead, mapping every exposed root, every tangle of vines, every thorny bush that threatened the wheelchair's passage. It pulled with a silent urgency, its powerful muscles working in sync to maneuver the weight and wheels through the dense vegetation. The chair creaked and groaned, its wheels sometimes slipping on the damp earth or bumping against hidden stones. Every movement was a challenge, a battle against the forest's resistance. Branches scratched the side of the chair, leaves brushed against the grandmother's face, but the lion persisted, its focus unwavering. It knew that the cover was its only ally now, a protective veil against the eyes of the spreading destruction. The grandmother felt the abrupt change. The air, previously cool and damp, was now denser, saturated with the strong smell of earth, moss, and sap. The sounds of the forest intensified, the rustling of leaves under the lion's paws, the chirping of hidden birds, the whispering of the wind through the treetops. It was a wild, primitive world, and for a moment, the confusion in her mind gave way to a strange sense of belonging. She closed her eyes, and the images of the asylum in flames receded, replaced by glimpses of a distant past. A rope swing hanging from a leafy tree, the laughter of a child, the smell of apple pie baking in a wood-fired oven. Fragments of a life that felt as real as the movement of the chair beneath her. But the peace was fleeting. The hum of the machines, though muffled by the forest's density, was still a constant presence, a grave pulse that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. And the smell of smoke and burnt metal was stronger than ever, an acrid and persistent reminder that destruction was not just approaching, it was surrounding them. The lion could feel it. Its ears swiveled, catching every snap of a twig, every movement in the forest, but also the distant sound of something heavy being dragged and the unmistakable thump, thump, thump of a demolition hammer, now closer, more real. Atop his glass tower, her millionaire grandson was on the verge of an abyss. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. The phone which he had thrown was now back in his hand, but he wasn't speaking. He was just listening, his breathing heavy, gasping. "Sir, the demolition team found more tunnels." The contractor's voice was tense, almost a whisper despite the background noise. "It's not just a bunker. It's an underground network that extends beyond the property, and the documents, they're extensive. Financial records, letters, even a diary, all with her name on them. It seems she was, well, much more than we thought." The word diary hit the millionaire grandson like a lightning bolt. A diary, not just records, but thoughts, feelings, the very essence of his grandmother, written in her own words. This was not just a trace, it was a voice, a witness, and the network of tunnels. That meant the time capsule could be anywhere, perhaps even outside the limits of the property he was demolishing. "I want every square inch of that land searched," he screamed, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I want every tunnel sealed, every document incinerated. Find that capsule. Leave nothing behind, nothing." He smashed the phone against the table again, the device cracking. Sweat poured down his forehead, and he felt panic transform into a cold, calculating rage. He could not fail. His reputation, his inheritance, his future. Everything depended on the complete obliteration of the past. He picked up another phone, dialing a different number with trembling fingers. "Prepare a search team," he ordered, his voice now a deadly whisper. "Arm them. I want them to scour the adjacent forest. If they find anything, any person who might have a connection to the asylum, eliminate the threat. No questions asked, no traces." Back in the forest, the lion stopped abruptly. Its ears moved, catching a new sound, closer, more disturbing. It was not the hum of machines or the thump, thump, thump of the hammer. It was the sound of human voices, distant but unmistakable. And the smell. The smell of smoke was now mixed with a metallic aroma, a smell of burnt fuel, of something heavy moving through the forest. They were being hunted. The grandmother opened her eyes. Drawn by the lion's tense immobility, she followed the animal's gaze, her cloudy eyes fixing on a point in the distance. Above the treetops, not far off, a new column of smoke rose, thicker, darker, like a black monster swallowing the sky. And with it, the sound of something heavy moving, the grinding of tracks, the roar of an engine. The lion let out a low, deep growl, its golden eyes fixed on the approaching threat. It knew that the forest, though offering cover, could also become a trap. They could not stay there. The sun, the promise of refuge, was no longer just a destination. It was a direction, a desperate escape. With a swift and decisive movement, the lion bit the wheelchair handle again. This time, it did not follow a path, but forged one. It turned towards an even denser part of the forest, where the vegetation was almost impenetrable, a tangle of trees and bushes that seemed untouched by man. It was a more difficult, more dangerous path, but it offered the only hope of escaping the approaching hunters. It pulled, and the wheelchair began to move, no longer towards an open sun, but into the heart of the wilderness, to a place where silence and the wild could perhaps protect them from the fury of obliteration. The journey deepened, not into the light, but into the essence of the forest, where the sun could still penetrate, but danger could not. Time was running out, and the forest was their last sanctuary. The forest swallowed them, no longer as a refuge, but as a green and dark labyrinth where sunlight struggled to penetrate. The lion did not hesitate. Its golden eyes, previously fixed on the smoke, now scanned the terrain ahead, mapping every exposed root, every tangle of vines, every thorny bush that threatened the wheelchair's passage. It pulled with a silent urgency, its powerful muscles working in sync to maneuver the weight and wheels through the dense vegetation. The chair creaked and groaned, its wheels sometimes slipping on the damp earth or bumping against hidden stones. Every movement was a challenge, a battle against the forest's resistance. Branches scratched the side of the chair, leaves brushed against the grandmother's face, but the lion persisted, its focus unwavering. It knew that the cover was its only ally now, a protective veil against the eyes of the spreading destruction. The grandmother felt the abrupt change. The air, previously cool and damp, was now denser, saturated with the strong smell of earth, moss and sap. The sounds of the forest intensified, the rustling of leaves under the lion's paws, the chirping of hidden birds, the whispering of the wind through the treetops. It was a wild, primitive world, and for a moment the confusion in her mind gave way to a strange sense of belonging. She closed her eyes, and the images of the asylum in flames receded, replaced by glimpses of a distant past. A rope swing hanging from a leafy tree, the laughter of a child, the smell of apple pie baking in a wood-fired oven. Fragments of a life that felt as real as the movement of the chair beneath her, but the peace was fleeting. The hum of the machines, though muffled by the forest's density, was still a constant presence, a grave pulse that seemed to vibrate through the very earth. And the smell of smoke and burnt metal was stronger than ever, an acrid and persistent reminder that destruction was not just approaching, it was surrounding them. The lion could feel it. Its ears swiveled, catching every snap of a twig, every movement in the forest, but also the distant sound of something heavy being dragged and the unmistakable thump, thump, thump of a demolition hammer, now closer, more real. Atop his glass tower, her millionaire grandson was on the verge of an abyss. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. The phone, which he had thrown, was now back in his hand, but he wasn't speaking. He was just listening, his breathing heavy, gasping. "Sir, the demolition team found more tunnels." The contractor's voice was tense, almost a whisper, despite the background noise. "It's not just a bunker. It's an underground network that extends beyond the property, and the documents, they're extensive. Financial records, letters, even a diary, all with her name on them. It seems she was, well, much more than we thought." The word diary hit the millionaire grandson like a lightning bolt. A diary, not just records, but thoughts, feelings, the very essence of his grandmother, written in her own words. This was not just a trace, it was a voice, a witness, and the network of tunnels. That meant the time capsule could be anywhere, perhaps even outside the limits of the property he was demolishing. "I want every square inch of that land searched," he screamed, his voice hoarse with desperation. "I want every tunnel sealed, every document incinerated. Find that capsule. Leave nothing behind. Nothing!" He smashed the phone against the table again, the device cracking. Sweat poured down his forehead, and he felt panic transform into a cold, calculating rage. He could not fail. His reputation, his inheritance, his future, everything depended on the complete obliteration of the past. He picked up another phone, dialing a different number with trembling fingers. "Prepare a search team," he ordered, his voice now a deadly whisper. "Arm them. I want them to scour the adjacent forest. If they find anything, any person, who might have a connection to the asylum, eliminate the threat. No questions asked, no traces." The lion advanced, each step a battle. Its sharp claws tore at the earth, its hind leg muscles propelling its massive body and the chair's weight. Thorny branches whipped at its sides, but it barely felt them, adrenaline coursing through its veins. The sound of tracks and the roar of the engine were louder now, a disturbing echo that seemed to come from multiple directions, as if the forest were being surrounded. And the voices. They were clearer, closer, short, muffled commands, the rustling of uniforms and the metallic click of weapons. The grandmother felt the urgency in the lion's movement. Her eyes, previously cloudy, now held a glint of alertness. She did not understand the full extent of the danger, but the sensation of being pursued was undeniable, a primal memory of flight that resonated within her being. She tightened her hands on the chair's arms, her knuckles white. Suddenly, a vivid image burst into her mind, not a swing, but a map, hand-drawn, with secret marks and an X in one corner, a map of tunnels, of hidden passages beneath the earth. The diary. She remembered writing in it, hiding things, protecting secrets. The asylum was not just a home, it was a hiding place, a vault of memories and truths. The lion stopped again, this time abruptly, making the chair sway. The smell of diesel smoke and human sweat was overwhelming, mixed with the aroma of gunpowder. A strong beam of light swept through the forest's darkness, passing a few meters from them, momentarily illuminating a tangle of ferns and a fallen log. They were close, too close. The lion crouched, its golden fur blending with the shadows and foliage. It growled, an almost inaudible sound, but laden with menace. A masculine voice, hoarse and authoritative, echoed through the forest. "I saw something! Over here! A fresh trail!" The grandmother's heart pounded. She could feel the warmth of the lion's body against the chair, the tension in its muscles. She looked at it, and in the animal's golden eyes, she saw not just fear, but fierce determination. It would not abandon her. With a calculated movement, the lion turned, not forward, but sideways, towards a narrow crevice between two ancient trees, almost invisible in the forest's density. It was a passage that seemed to lead nowhere, a dead end, but the lion knew better. It squeezed through, pulling the chair with it, scraping wood and metal against the rough bark of the trees. It was a tight, almost impossible squeeze, but they managed to pass, emerging into a small clearing, hidden by a curtain of vines and moss. The clearing was a secret of the forest, a natural sanctuary. In the center, a huge moss-covered rock rose, and around it the vegetation was even denser, almost impenetrable. But most notably was the air. Here, the smell of smoke and diesel was muffled, almost non-existent, and above, through a natural opening in the treetops, a ray of sunlight pierced the darkness, falling directly onto the rock like a divine spotlight. It was the sun, not the final destination, but a temporary refuge, a point of light amidst the darkness of the pursuit. The lion released the chair handle, its eyes fixed on the clearing's entrance, its ears swiveling, catching the sounds of the approaching hunters, their heavy footsteps, their voices becoming more distinct. They were a few meters away, searching the area where the lion had made its sharp turn. The grandmother looked at the ray of sunlight, at the rock, and then at the lion. A strange calm enveloped her. She reached out her trembling hand and touched the lion's soft mane. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "Thank you, my friend." The lion growled softly in response, a sound of recognition and protection. It knew that the clearing was a hiding place, but not a permanent solution. The pursuit was intensifying, and time was running out. The sun here was a promise, a reminder that light still existed even in the heart of the deepest darkness. But to fully reach it, they would have to emerge. They would have to face the danger that surrounded them. The forest had offered its last sanctuary, and now the next step would be the most dangerous of all. The clearing, once a refuge, now pulsed with threat. The sounds of the hunters were no longer distant echoes. They were a tangible presence, a tightening noose. "I swear I saw something here." The voice, hoarse and impatient, seemed to come from behind the curtain of vines that hid the entrance. A rustling of bushes, the snap of branches under heavy boots, the smell of human sweat, gunpowder and diesel invaded the sanctuary, defiling the pure forest air. The lion was crouched, a golden statue of vigilance, every muscle tense, ready to explode into action. Its eyes, golden slits, swept the entrance, fixed on the point where the sunlight, once a beacon of hope, now seemed like a spotlight on the imminent trap. The grandmother, with her hand still on the soft mane, felt the subtle tremor that ran through the animal's body. She looked at the ray of sunlight on the rock, and then at the lion, a silent trust in its gaze. There was no time to hesitate. To stay there was to await capture, annihilation. The lion let out a low growl, almost a murmur to itself, and then with surprising speed for its size it turned. Not towards the entrance from which the hunters came, but towards the opposite side of the clearing, where the vegetation seemed even more impenetrable, a wall of vines and dense foliage. It was a place where no one would expect something so large to pass. It bit the wheelchair handle again, with a firmness that left no doubt. The grandmother felt the pull, the urgency. She clung to the arms of the chair, blindly trusting her protector. The lion advanced, not with brute force as before, but with a wild cunning. It used its massive body to clear a path, pushing aside the thick vines and bushes, creating a passage where there was none. The sound of breaking branches was muffled by the roar of engines and the voices of the hunters, who now seemed to be inside the clearing, their shadows dancing at the entrance. "It's clear! No one here!" a voice shouted, full of frustration. The lion could hear the sound of footsteps moving away, the confusion in the voices. They had escaped by a hair's breadth. They were moving, inch by inch, through a green tunnel, the wheelchair scraping against the plants, the grandmother being pulled forward into the unknown. The lion did not stop, its muscles working in sync, each step calculated, each movement a silent prayer for freedom. The forest opened and closed around them. The lion did not follow a path, but an instinct, an internal compass that guided it towards the light. The smell of smoke and diesel diminished, replaced by the fresh aroma of damp earth and leaves. The sunlight, previously a solitary ray, began to filter more widely, as if the forest was slowly yielding, opening up for them. The grandmother raised her face, feeling the warmth on her skin. A sense of lightness enveloped her, a clarity she hadn't felt in a long time. The memories of the diary, of the map, of the asylum's secrets were no longer a burden but a legacy, something to be protected, not forgotten. Then, with a final powerful push, the lion broke through the last barrier of bushes. The wheelchair swayed and stopped. Before them, there was no more dense forest. There was an open field, vast and green, bathed in glorious sun. The sky was a deep blue, without a cloud, without smoke. It was the sun, the destination, the promise fulfilled. The lion released the chair handle, panting, but with a gleam of triumph in its golden eyes. It had fulfilled its mission. It had led her away from danger, into the light. The grandmother looked at the horizon, at the sun warming her face, at the freedom stretching before her, the ruins of the asylum, the grandson's fury, the darkness of the forest. Everything seemed distant, a shadow that had been left behind. Far away in the glass tower, her millionaire grandson screamed, smashing the phone to pieces. "Incompetence! How could you lose them?" His rage was a fire that consumed everything, but it could not reach his grandmother, it could not touch the sun. He had failed to erase the past, to destroy the truth. In that open field, under the sun, the grandmother smiled, a true, serene smile that lit up her aged face. The lion lay down beside the chair, its head resting on its paws, its eyes fixed on her, its faithful guardian. The future was uncertain, But the sunlight was a promise that life, memory, and hope would always find a way, even through the deepest darkness. The journey had not ended, but the immediate danger had been overcome. They were in the sun, together, a silent testament to the strength of connection, the resilience of the spirit, and the unbreakable loyalty of an unexpected friend. The grandmother's story, her secrets, her legacy, would not be lost. They had found their sanctuary, their place in the sun.